welcome back. It's been some weird and wonderful times at the moment, and I'm sure Australia and New Zealand and various places around the globe where you're listening from have all gone through the same thing. So look, we thought it was pretty applicable at the moment to look at sort of leadership style webinar this time, and just to get everyone's focus back on what it is and what the actual report is about. So my name's Becky, and I'll be presenting the webinar today. And we're going to have a look at a couple of different tools as well, and some that you'll be familiar with. But because I have so many new people, some of this is completely new to those that have just been accredited and coming through the ranks and understanding what reports are available to them. So, I'm going to start off by saying leading people with such different behavioural styles has always been fairly difficult at the best of times. But, even now it's been made even more challenging with dispersed groups of people, working from home, some from the office, some out and about in cars, all sorts of things. But due to the current environment, it's really prolific now about how to lead people and who you are as a leader. So in this webinar, we're going to be looking a little bit closer at the lead and manage assessment, and just very briefly touch on the 360 feedback. The lead and manage assessment has been designed to provide leaders with skills and confidence to create productive, meaningful relationships with their employees. So it's there to help them understand how to lead, and perhaps lead more effectively in some areas and with some people, through a really tailored approach to each unique leader's strengths and development areas. If I can get this to go, my computer's playing up today. Why does it always do that? Why can't I get it to go? There we go. Just as well, this is an informal webinar. So when it comes to building practical and real leadership development programs, tools like this lead and manage assessment and the 360 feedback are a real game changer. Well, especially for me, I can tell you it has been. It's a well-rounded way of delving into your own natural leadership styles and learning how to build on leadership qualities you already possess, as well as, of course, understanding development areas and others' perspectives of you in doing this, which is pretty important. So before we go inside the assessments in the 360, we need to just have a look at some aspects of leadership, as there is so much written about it. And as I've learned, everyone has their own thoughts on what makes a leader, and even more thoughts on what makes an effective leader. So obviously, as a leader, how they communicate, how they make decisions, how they forecast ahead, future think, build trust, how they collaborate has an immediate impact on their ability to lead and influence others. And that, of course, impacts personal success. Businesses specialising in leadership have debated for decades whether leaders are actually born or created. And I can tell you this debate still carries on today. Do a quick Google and you'll find many articles about this very topic. It's actually very interesting to read. Can a person teach themselves how to lead well over time by understanding the qualities needed to be effective? Lucky for all of you, I'm not going to be debating this today. You can make your own assessment on it when you Google it, but I'm going to have a brief look at just some of those qualities, but more so especially in one area. So, there's a variety of agreed traits as to what makes an effective leader. Every list I look at is slightly different, and I'm sure you'll have your own thoughts on it too. But either way, one of the most agreed aspects for the traits of a good leader is self-awareness. And on this list that I've borrowed, you can actually see that it's number 4. So it's absolute key in effective and successful leadership today. Yes, there are other qualities that good leaders need to have or say they need to have, but being self-aware of how you rate in each of these other key qualities is a must. How can you develop or strengthen them if you don't actually know your starting point? So to truly understand how you act and react in situations, really understanding your natural preferences for your own leadership style, it's really essential for the modern day leader, and that's where tools like the 360 feedback and this lead and manage assessment can be incredibly helpful. So can I just add that being self-aware does not mean you automatically get everything right as a leader, but it does go a long way towards helping your team members want to even be led or being respected by them as a leader. So a big part of unleashing your leadership potential is really about personal awareness. We understand that an even bigger part then is to use this information well and then have the ability to adapt your own leadership style when needed. So it's all very well knowing what it is, but what do you do with that information? So we find that understanding how to modify or adapt your own qualities in certain situations is key. So why is it, I guess people say to me, why do we have to adapt? Well, you don't. It's totally your choice. But we understand that not everyone in the team or around you is the same behavioural style as you or the leader. I'm going to say you and the leader, because sometimes I've got coaches listening as well as managers. So I'm sure it happens, but not often, that they are all the same style as the leader. So think of all the different behavioural types around you on any given day, just for yourself, especially, with all this Zoom and stuff going. So think about people in your team right now, wherever you work, in the office or at home, or even if you're not even in a leadership role, think about your clients' organisations and all the diversity of different behavioural types in the teams. So even a quick think about things and you'll realise just how diverse it can be. Even outside the workplace, I have to say, if we think about our families and just how many different behavioural styles we have represented around us just in our families alone. So as a modern leader these days, there is an expectation to learn to modify our own behaviour in certain situations with different types of people. And this has never been more extreme than now. It's because we now understand that other people that are often different styles to ourselves need different things from us as leaders. So their expectations need to be met too. They may communicate differently. They might be motivated differently. They need different reward and recognition to the way that we need it. Perhaps they listen and they think differently with different filters on. The list goes on. I could sit here for ages just telling you all the differences that there can possibly be. As a leader, you not only have to have self-awareness about where you are on the map, but you also need to be understanding about where your team's needs are and what they expect from you. You actually need to modify your behaviours a lot as a leader. So just for a moment, think back to teachers or adults in your life that you can honestly say made a real positive impact on your life. So outside of your own parents, for example. So chances are there will be far fewer than you might think. Most people only have about 5 or 6 adults who made a real impact on them. And chances are they were leaders who had very well-defined characteristics, for example. Maybe they were kind, maybe they were respectful or direct and decisive, which you really connected with. Or maybe they showed patience and endless encouragement for you. I don't know. But chances are, again, that they adapted their connection with you to suit your own style when they needed to. They were likely leaders of you who understood you and adapted their style to make the most impact with you that they could. So fantastic if it happened to be a natural fit because you were fundamentally like the same style as them, but that doesn't often happen. It's more likely that they had really made an attempt to modify in some way, whether sometimes consciously or subconsciously, but the more conscious you are about the adaptation, the more you can do it, the better it will be. So it's this awareness that makes them great leaders, and they can adapt themselves when needed. They can play on their strengths and potentially surround themselves with others that can help deal with development areas if they can't develop it themselves, because they really know who they are. Now, controversially here, as this might be to say, but if you think of Jacinda Ardern just recently, the New Zealand Prime Minister, take politics completely out of it for a moment and just look at the person. So regardless of political preference, it's said that an overwhelming majority of New Zealanders, and possibly the world, think that she adapted her style and connected really well during daily briefings and overseeing the coronavirus lockdown in general. She was very present, fairly clear on decisions, presented facts well, and even did Facebook Lives. Looking at that, I could go a bit further into it, but looking at that, that suited a lot of different styles in the way of communicating. You know, there's formal, there's fact, there's informal, there's connection, there's all sorts of different things that she did. To use the word at the moment, which is on trend, would be the word pivot. So we could say she pivoted her personality to cover a lot of aspects. We at Extended Disc will often say adapt. So her leadership style is judged on the issue of adapting her communication is actually scored really highly. I'm not going to poke around at all the things good and bad that she did during this time, but the general outcome of her modifying her leadership and becoming far more transparent in communication won many people over. And like her or not, that gained a lot of trust and respect with people. So in my own consulting days, I have to say it never ceased to amaze me how many companies called me to run leadership programs in their leadership team, but then their manager or their GM or operations manager or even higher didn't really think to be involved, or maybe didn't really want to take part. You know, it required quite a bit of influencing from me until they saw how all this clicked together, and then they were willing to put themselves forward and learn about themselves. But this is not actually natural for a lot of leaders to put themselves forward in front of, you know, direct reports or peers to be assessed per se. But in all, self-aware leaders are able to look beyond their own interests and see how other people are affected by their actions. So this allows leaders to act not just in their best interest, but their best interest of the team or organisation. So it's pretty important to get this type of awareness in all aspects and all levels. And this is, I guess, where Lead and Manage report can offer us extra insights, you know, pages of wonderful knowledge about who they are and what their tendencies or preferences are. So let's look at some of the basic leadership cultural types as well, and amongst all this. So the assessment, of course, has the profiles, of course, and we can delve into who they are and how they are currently adapting. You know, that's really important, as that you're actually dealing with real-time influences on them and real-time things that you can discuss. So the special cases that might be present in their profiles lead to really good, healthy discussions about how or why they might be feeling like they are. So again, in leadership, this is pretty important because yes, they get under stress. Yes, they get frustrated just like everyone else. So the flexibility diamond, also in the report, is incredible to look at and find to what extent they might be using energy or effort to make this type of adaptation if they are adapting. You know, understanding that this is important as for a leader, and even more for you as a coach or consultant, how they are adapting, how much energy it's taking is something that needs to be brought to light. Again, can I just say that if this is a new leader or they are going through something which is new to them when it comes to adapting, of course their arrow is going to be longer or possibly pointing to the white areas. Most of you listening now will know how to use the flexibility map. So it's pretty important, these pages, to discuss it with them. I just said before, having a look at some of the leadership cultures. So the assessment then goes on to describe natural leadership cultures. You know, that will help them understand aspects about themselves, about how they operate as an actual leader. Understanding where your natural leadership culture might evolve from is a really good idea, as it can highlight all sorts of good information for you to utilize as the leader or the coach. Now, just remember that this is capturing their natural style, so you'll need to check back with the diamond to see where they might be stretching to if they are adapting their leadership culture in some way. The report has obviously a brief description of each leadership culture or type as well, to get some great discussion going. And you can see here on the screen, it goes through for a couple of pages and has each different leadership culture around the diamond. So pretty important to have a look at and be able to utilise as well. We're just going to bring up the whole of the leadership cultures now. You can just see here. I'm not going to go into it just because of time constraints as well. But when we look at effective leadership, we can understand that it does come from all around the diamond here. Okay, so I say diamond, but all around the diagram. There is no one style that is more successful at all. Each leadership type brings their own unique strengths, their own development areas, and their own leadership culture. You can see just by the name of the different types, that what they might impact or how they might impact people around them. You know, just due to, as I said, the time constraints, we're just going to have a quick look at, say, 4 of the main disc ones as well. But can I just remind you that if you need to have all these combination ones as well, like DI, IS, SC, and CD, you can actually get them from the VIP pages in the HR Profiling Solutions website. By logging in there and searching for leadership, this will come up. And there's actually, I think if I recall, there's literally like a page or 2 pages on each of the particular leadership types. By all means, go in there because it's got it's very informative. So let's just take the 4, the normal DISC. This is typical of your D-style leader, quite authoritative. So again, can I just say I'm talking 100% D style here. So very few people have just 100%, but I'm going to be using the words that go along with 100% pure form of D. So a D style leader is one we call authoritative. They focus more on authoritarian style of leadership where the leader would prefer to be in almost complete control and in charge. It tends to be where the leaders or managers follow. Let's start again. It tends to be where the leader, managers, and the followers can follow by having a pressure applied and attained to the target and short-term goals. Gosh, that was a mouthful I wrote there. The leader tells the followers listen, and it's all about speed and quick execution. And it's pretty typical of this profile, the feeling of speed and in charge. They do tend to be comfortable with crisis situations and they don't mind making quick decisions and often without a lot of information. An area that can tend to be a challenge for them though is they're so result driven that they can tend to see people as any other resource, which of course then lends itself to support the common view that they can be unempathetic, especially under pressure. Like anything, there are definitely situations that this type of leadership works really well. I've seen it, and it's really necessary to get things moving or pumping, going. And there are other times that this type of leadership style doesn't suit at all, and it can cause a huge amount of resentment. So what I'm saying here is there's no naturally right or wrong for using these particular styles. Maybe they can adapt out of it at different times. That's great. But you know, there is definitely call for when you need that authoritative style coming through. Let's just have a quick look at the I style. So an I style leader tends to be more informal, we often know that, and usually social while focusing on things like creativity, positivity, and enthusiasm. So a high energy environment is often more valued to them than accuracy, tasks, or detailed rules. So emphasis on personal relationships and leading as a friend is quite common, though they still do tend to promote competitiveness, but through inspiring and not necessarily putting pressure on people. So often their authority is based on, say, charisma, motivation, producing good atmosphere in which they're comfortable in creating for others. It's quite natural. The informal leader will often thrive in new evolving organisations that harness a lot of variety. They are seen as people leaders and need the contact with people. But like what we just discussed before, there's understandably a need for this type of leadership, but it needs to be the right time with the right strategy and for the right type of people that prefer this type of leadership. If you have a team member that needs far more planning, structure, and far less, of the high energy that is exuded, then this might be problematic, and it could be time to adapt and do different things for those people. So an S style, they are seen as being supportive type of leader who guides and teaches, develops followers. So an S style leader emphasizes things like loyalty, consensus, trust, and sincerity with the team. Supportive style leaders provide in-depth support to their team and expect to receive mutual support back. Their authority often comes from experience and expertise. However, they are comfortable maintaining a stable and service-oriented approach to their leadership. Supportive style leaders emphasize gradual evolution while strongly focusing on agreed upon long-term goals. So they often feel more comfortable leading a small team and show lots of participation and hands-on approach. But of course they can also lead larger teams when needed. I'm not saying they have to have smaller teams always, but they do tend to feel more comfortable. Like the other styles, there are times that gradual evolution of company or team goals is perfect, steps at a time. But this pace may not always be suitable for every stage of growth. So you guessed it, yep, they have to adapt. Lastly, the C-style leader. Now, of course, this is emphasis on quality. Things like following rules and compliance. The quality type leader tends to maintain distance from the team and therefore might create less interpersonal connection, but that is often okay in many industries who need different, who has basically different values in interpersonal connections. So yes, they are often seen as being a bit aloof from people at times, and it's probably a little bit more noticeable by team members that need more connection, like I's and S's that tend to sit in that people quadrant. The quality leader focuses on things like systematic approach and ensures everyone knows what is specifically expected of them. They tend to prefer using emails and written directions to communicate, as then they have evidence and history to look back on if needed. As a leader, they will analyse details and are interested in facts if a situation arises. They are more interested in the knowledge of facts and that type of information than they are probably with emotive or abstract feelings, which can make them feel a little uncomfortable. I know quite a few companies led by C-styles where this is a really great fit and it really does work well. Though at times the same person needs to adapt to also keep their relationships a little more solid with some of the different styles as well. So like anything, we can gain some insights from generalized information like I've just given you, but it's obviously running a report is going to give you absolute information specifically about the person themselves. So one of the things I just wanted to have a quick chat about was also, I'm just going to flip the page over here, talking in regards to strengths. Now, the Lead and Manage report shows a lot of different motivators, development areas and strengths like we're used to in some of the other reports. So these are wonderful for leadership programs and you'd use them according to how you're implementing, I don't know, strength-based learning development or other development strategies. It also gives you insight into management versus leadership diamond, which leads to a really interesting talk, I have to say, from past experience. The diamond is divided up into management aspects and leadership aspects, and then of course strengths and motivators, etc. So these pages are really important, quite critical to go through, especially if you are developing a program around them. However, one of the things I wanted to mention was don't forget that also in using their strengths, there does tend to be a predisposition to overuse of a strength. When you get so comfortable with it that you use it continuously, and therefore it really doesn't end up becoming or seen by many others as a strength. In fact, it becomes a bit more of a hindrance to other people. They can get frustrated with it. So if you don't know about overuse or how to look at the overuse diamond, which is in here as well, in the report as well, please familiarize yourself with it, because what you'll find is in debriefing and in any leadership program, there will definitely be areas where people overuse their strengths. And I'm talking things, I'll give you an example, like an I style leader, for example, they become so participative and collaborative, and they chat things through, but they might chat so much that they can become quite disruptive or a bit too friendly. So when it comes time for discipline or putting the hard word out there, people feel very awkward because it's a friend that's crossed over the line. So there's those times where those strengths can be wonderful, but they can be overused as well. I have to say it's pretty typical that we don't all know our blind spots, and especially when it comes to things like our overuse areas. We often think we're doing a tremendous job of using this wonderful strength that's easy to use for us, only to find out later, of course, that it can be frustrating our team. And of course, delivered in the wrong way, that can put many leaders on the defensive, and it can not go well at all. So there's a couple of really good pages in the Lead and Manage assessment that sees us looking at how others see our communication, how they see different perspectives of us as well as leaders. And that's really important and really good to get the ball rolling. However, this is probably a really good time for me to mention that the 360 is brilliant in this area here as well. So very quickly, because of time, we won't go into it. The Extended DISC 360 feedback tool can measure skills, behaviours, competencies of an individual leader. I just need to remind you though, it's a completely separate tool to any of their behavioural assessments. Okay, so it's not DISC related. So it does consume more points, but totally worth it when you're doing a program like this. So it can be used in many areas such as performance appraisal, succession planning, team development. So it's really excellent in looking and analysing leadership as a whole, as a development tool. So what is it? For those that are not familiar with it, the 360 feedback's designed to measure the opinion of a group of people from all around that individual, that leader. So in this case, we're going to assume that this is a leader, because you can do it on just staff members as well. But so feedback would be gained from the leader themselves. They would answer the questionnaire themselves, and then anonymously you would gather results in from their peers, their direct reports, and their manager as well. So this type of feedback delivered well can be a wonderful reality check, but I have to just emphasize the word delivered well. I've also seen some being delivered and it's been a horror story. The person receiving the information has been really on the back foot and really upset by what was said. So self-perception versus others' perception is pretty important to take on board. So if you're not familiar with the 360, by all means, familiarise yourself with it. If you need to have some help with it, HR profiling is there, or your master trainer, of course, to help with getting it put together. But there's all sorts of templates and things in your account that can be popped in. I think there's up to 12 or 14 of them already pre-designed. And quite often, if I'm using a 360, I will use one of those templates and just change out the actual questions. So you can have question groups. Quite often I'll put under a question group maybe 6 or 7 questions only, because after 7 or 8 different headings of communication, honesty, integrity, whatever it is you want to put in there, the actual survey can get quite large. So don't forget the 360. It's amazing for understanding blind spots, talking about perspective, etc. But back to our Lead and Manage assessment. The report at the back, I'm just carrying on here, but the report in the back pages, there are some really wonderful pages that detail competencies and heaps of different varieties of areas here, and you can see on the slide. So these are broken down into some areas like management versus leadership style competencies. The subheadings will help you build even more depth in looking at and analysing the behaviour and motivating people through behaviour in, say, like headings like motivating people, directing people, things like the leader's decision-making style, their communication style, how others view your communication style. So all these types of things is really interesting. Now, some of the pages have a workbook style, as you can see there. So what I've found is, as I've been working through some of this, just to break up a debrief or a program a wee bit is by getting them to put down their thoughts in some of these areas. I know a lot of you are already coaching and consulting and will have your own program made up, but for those of you who are just starting out, these little workbook areas are ideal for capturing thoughts along the way. Some of the last couple of pages are also really helpful. I've spent a lot of time looking and writing and, you know, really good programs from these, and you know, they can go on 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years with a leadership program. So it's really up to you what information you pull out. But I found this particularly helpful, these ones, because at the back, they are improvement areas, like, you know, how to improve yourself, and suggested hints and tips and tricks on those. So the one on the slide here you can see is improving your success as a leader in general. It's got reminders. It takes you into suggestions of what to potentially avoid, and then it has some development areas as well. So those development areas, of course, just be careful. You may not need to develop all of those that you see there. If you've got your own way of, I guess, delving into what is really needed with different action plans, then this is probably a good thing to look at. But I find it really great, just a few tips for them to understand how to manage themselves better around or in their team. But what I find even more so is, and don't forget this, you can run the open preview on your Finks account, and you can tag the person, the leader that you want to bring up. And you can also run, like, there's lots of tips and in different areas, so improvements in different areas. On that note, you'll also have the tip report as well. Okay, so I'm just giving you lots of different tools, add-ons here, but the tip report, if you run that, there's lots of different sections of how to improve the leader's communication, how to improve with a C style, how to improve with a D style, etc., etc. So really good in-depth information. And of course, in this particular lead and manage assessment, there's even a very brief action plan at the back. Now, it's just brief, it's workbook oriented as well, and it's just picking out 3 development areas, etc., and 3 strengths, and looking at that. I would probably expect most of you would have got your own action plan or development program where you can take this information, the required information, and develop it in the correct way. So I'm also going to remind you, because a lot of people forget this, there is a brochure that accompanies the lead and manage assessment. So it's actually kind of almost, really, I should call it a guide. And it's been developed to go along with it. And it has a really excellent content with helping you lay foundations of what the assessment's based on, helping you to talk through what you might need to say to someone who's completing this leadership assessment. So do have a look at it. I suspect it's on the VIP pages if you haven't got it. Otherwise, sorry ladies, the HRP team, you might need to just send them a contact or your master trainer and they can supply it for you. But it's actually really worth going and having a look at, because there's some really great little tips and tricks throughout the guide as well that will help you. Okay, so can I just reiterate that everyone can be a leader if they want to? Granted, only a few become great leaders. So regardless if you've worked your way up through the corporate ladder or just starting your own business, the route to leadership is never an easy one. I can tell you, I see it. You will encounter various types of situations, emotions, various people and their needs. There will be good times and there will be stressful times in becoming a good leader. However, a great leader is always able to lead a team to success, regardless of the situation that they're facing, as impossible as it sounds sometimes. So we know that effective leaders are often determined by how well they interact with their employees and others. Their competence to relate, communicate, influence, and motivate others is critical key skill these days in modern leadership. So it's really clear that a successful leader is also someone that is very aware of themselves and know how they are, especially in relation to things like strengths and development areas, communication, how to motivate their teams, how different their teams are to them, what natural style they have in leading other people. So they are aware to modify, they are aware to adapt from one interaction and situation to the next, sometimes inspiring others and being charismatic, and at times directive and tough. So being self-aware, among other leadership qualities, is absolutely critical. The Lead and Manage assessment today is even more, there's actually more in it that I could even fit in today. But if you haven't used it, go and have a look. Get the guide with it, as it's so informative for showing you some extra ways to use the pages. But really have a look and work out how you can use it. Don't forget it's customizable as well. So of course, if you'd like some more information, or if you open up your account and find that for some reason you don't have the leadership assessment in there, of course ask for some information from your master trainer or HR profiling, and they can walk you through it. But coming to the end now, but thanks for listening. And I know that everyone has their own leadership thoughts and ideas. This was just one very slimmed down idea just to show you the leadership assessment, and just to remind you that the 360 goes incredibly well together with it. The tips report is also one that I use as a bit of a package together. And of course the open preview, I check in on that all the time, just because there's different information that you can glean or gain on someone, I guess, that is not necessarily in any of the reports. So if you're not familiar with that, by all means go and have a look as well. So I will leave it there because we're running well over time, but thank you very much for joining me. I always enjoy talking leadership aspects, and again, just highlighting the different ways that you can use it in your leadership programs. Thanks everyone. See you next month. Bye.